Hi, I'm Jo, the Creative Director at Take Two, and I'd like to begin by acknowledging the Gundungurra people, the traditional owners of the land where I'm recording from today. Across the world, from her storefront studio in small town Mississippi, quilter and artist Coulter Fussell transforms materials left at her door into playful, deeply human works. There's tenderness and chaos, there's deliberation and freedom, there's kitsch and there's beauty. There's military fabric, and then there's that chenille bedspread that we all vaguely remember from the 80s. At the heart of it all is a simple belief, and in Coulter's own words, every quilter could if the world would just let her. Every quilter deserves it all. In this conversation, Coulter shares her work and approach, discusses the abundance and curation of both fabric and imagery that inspires her, and what it means to give discarded things and stories another life. If you enjoy this episode, please share it with a friend or leave us a review. It will only take a moment, but it really helps us bring more artists like Coulter to new audiences. Let's dive into this generous and joyful conversation with quilt and textile artist Coulter Fussell. Coulter! Hi, how are you? Thank you so much for joining us.
I'm good. How are you? Thank y'all for having me. I'm really excited.
Oh, yeah, I'm so excited about this conversation and talking to you about your work. I'm a big fan. Your work is so joyful and inspiring, and yeah, it's just going to be so nice to learn more and for our audience to hear some insights and about your creativity and your making and your path to being an artist. I thought I would start with a bit of a kind of here we are in this moment. I always think it's quite amazing that we can connect in this way across the world. I'm in Australia, south of Sydney, just past 9:30 in the morning. I live in a regional spot. It's quite green outside because we're coming into the middle of spring now. So the grass is green again and it's starting to warm up. It's a lovely sunny day. And I would love to hear about you and where you find yourself in this moment.
Yeah, well, I'm in Water Valley, Mississippi, which is a little small hill country town in rural Mississippi, the northern part of the state, in the southeastern United States. And we're going into fall, so it's still green outside though because we're in a hot, humid place. So other places might still consider this looking like summer, but it's just now cooling down a little bit to where the highs are like 80 degrees.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And it's the end of your day. What did your day look like today?
Yeah, it's 5:30 or 6 in the afternoon, and I spent, like I do every day, waking up in the morning. I'd go on my walks and stuff, and then do the computer work side of being an artist, and which always takes more than you want it to, and then I spend the rest of the day in the studio.
Yeah, amazing. Well, thank you again for joining us. We'll be releasing this episode by video on YouTube and Facebook. And also we release these episodes by podcast. So if, as our audience, you're listening in, maybe you're driving or maybe you're doing some chores or maybe you're making, hopefully you're sitting and making and listening to this, make sure at some point you do check the episode description and the show notes because we'll be talking about Coulter's work and we'll be showing some images, and I'm sure you'll agree that these are such visual works and such rich works. So do make sure if you're listening in that you enjoy the imagery at some point as well. So Coulter, the first thing I would like to do, and I often like to start the interviews like this for our listeners, but as much for somebody who might not have come across your work before, I'd love you to just briefly describe your work. What does it look like? What does it feel like?
Well, my work, for one, it's real bright. and it's real playful. And my work is made almost entirely out of donated old textiles. So not too many things are sharp, new, clean. Lots of things is not clean. And, so I guess some people have said that there's like sort of nostalgic feels to it. That's not something that I'm intentionally going for. It's just something that happens to happen because I use these old textiles. And, lots of like sort of bouncy shapes, some cartoon characters, animals. If it was printed on a textile, in the past 100 years, it's in my work. So.
That's so interesting because you might feel an attachment to a certain piece as a maker, and someone might come to your work and feel the attachment to that piece for a completely different reason that you couldn't you couldn't predict or kind of plan. Is that something that you really enjoy about the work, how the audience comes to your work?
Yeah, it's one of the reasons I use donated textiles.
Yeah.
Is not only is the sort of act of donation part like an art supply for me, like that is important and really probably the most important thing. But after I've made the work, whatever the audience brings to the table, I don't even have to know about it. Like whatever their connection is to whatever piece of fabric is in there, if there's a connection at all, and there usually is, then that's the job is done there for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess it's sort of you don't need to know about it. It's not necessarily your business, but has anybody ever told you like what might the most interesting connection be that you've ever heard about your work?
Well, like a lot of these fabrics I get in are mass marketed fabrics. So, it'll be like, you'll see when you see the work, like a blanket with like, a panther on it or something. Well, they didn't just make one of those, like 50,000 of those. And so, people will be like, I had that growing up, that was in my parents' camper when we would go camping across Texas. Or so whenever I see that, I think of Texas, I use a lot of like cut and sew dolls, and so those are cartoon characters. And depending on your age, different cartoon characters, you relate to that,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, then let's look.
Prints. Oh, I'm sorry. Then just like general prints, like, especially down here, any sort of people down here really relate to that. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Yeah. So you might use them for the motifs as much as the patterns or the everyday sort of recognizable fabrics. Let's have a look at your studio. I think that's a good segue to see your studio. I'll just pull up a couple of those images now. So what we're looking at here are a few shots on screen of Coulter's studio, which looks like wild, incredible, repurposed magic to me. Coulter, can you explain your studio a bit and how you sort of go about bringing fabrics into the studio?
Yeah, well, my studio is a storefront on Main Street here in Water Valley. It's very big because it's a storefront. It's like 26 feet wide, like 100 feet long. And it's just packed from ceiling to floor, front to back, just fabric and textiles that people have dropped off at the front door for me. And I've been there this month it'll have been 10 years. And so you can probably imagine how many textiles I've collected or have been given to me over the decade. And I'm one of those artists who is not neat, but I've got my own way of sort of organizing this stuff. And you can see in these pictures there's like clothing racks, and then there's like a board running along one wall where I pin smaller pieces, Yeah. Because I got to be able to see all this stuff. I don't want to put it in a drawer and fold it because it's a bunch of small pieces of fabric. I'll never be able to know what I have. I have to see it all at all times, So it's out.
It just looks like an incredible play space Like, I mean, when I'm making quilts, one of my favorite things is just sitting and putting fabrics together and, looking at scraps and looking at bigger pieces and just kind of that play that can be so mindful I mean, is that what you try and bring into your studio space, a sense of play?
Well, I'm an optimist and I'm kind of a playful person, so it just kind of follows me in. I don't really have to try; it just shows up whether I like it or not. And you
It
know,
looks like it follows you in suitcases,
yeah,
Coulter.
oh,
So
yeah,
it's
drop off. I mean, that's a donation, and then I wound up using the suitcases in the work as well, the actual suitcases, and those suitcases were filled with all these like 1950s like negligees, like nice, it's so funny. So
wow.
I do have fun in there, and a lot of it is the nature of the fabric that's given to me. Lots of colors, lots of variation, but I do have a lot of stuff, and those pictures of my studio are old. Those are like 4 and 5 and 6 years old, so there's even more stuff now. So I do
Wow.
spend a lot of time sort of like making space to work. There's like trails, and then there's like a little work space, and then a trail to somewhere else. For all the stuff.
Yeah. And do you, I know we're getting into the weeds of your studio, but I think it's so fascinating about the process here. People are dropping off their fabrics or their clothes. Um, do you sort of sort it and put it in some kind of order of, right, this is a really spectacular piece, I'm going to hang on to this one, and like how do you organize it all? How do you organize yourself?
Yeah, well, I don't know what's spectacular until I use it.
Yeah.
Every piece of fabric is the same in terms of that. Like it'd be like a really, really like valuable piece of fabric money wise or something, or like a t-shirt from Walmart. It's all the same until I need it. And then
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, I want to use that or that. But the way I like on a pragmatic level, the way I organize is I have several clothing racks that go along one side of the wall that have big pieces of fabric thrown over them. And I have a red rack, two pink racks, a yellow rack, a green rack. And then I have two big like watermelon bins where they sell watermelons in the grocery store, the big cardboard bins that have all the huge pieces of fabric in them, like the comforters, the sleeping bags, lots of sheets, all that sort of stuff. I got a whole section of just florals, like only florals. That's like a fourth of the studio. And then another section of small pieces of fabric pinned to the wall that's like 40 feet long or something. And then there's a whole other section of things like notions, trim, edging, like all that stuff. Patterns. I don't even mess with the patterns, like clothing patterns, and I've probably got 10,000 of them.
Yeah, yeah. It sounds a bit like an incredible haberdashery op shop or thrift store. I think you'd say thrift store of your own.
Yeah,
You've got.
and then I have sewing machines because people also bring sewing machines, and so I have all sorts of old sewing machines in there. And then I have a woodworking area because as my work developed over the years, I started to put it on panel and use wood to support all these things, and so I have to have a whole like little wood shop area.
Wow. Wow. Growing. You're going to need another shop front. Let's take a look at a couple of works that perhaps really show an example of how you might bring these fabrics and motifs and textures together. So you have a body of work I think you call your river quilts. Is that correct? I'll bring up a couple of these pieces now that show, I guess, your mixed media approach. Can you explain what we're looking at here in this piece called Peachtree Mall?
Yeah, well, the river it's the river series is really about it's sort of narratively based on me growing up in my hometown of Columbus, Georgia, which is a river town. We grew up on the Chattahoochee River, and so it was this town that was like lots of cotton mills. The textile industry was the reason the town existed. And Fort Benning, the home of the U.S. infantry, is also based there. So you'll see that will come in later as we talk about the war quilts. And so, the river quilts are really these assemblages I make that sort of narratively draw from these images of growing up on a river town and, West Georgia. And so the piece we were looking at, that's just an old circus poster that was in my room growing up. Peachtree Mall in Columbus was a mall I went to. And I have that fatigue colored, braid and drapes and bows, like sort of talking about the Fort Benning there in Columbus. And then you got paintings of cows on the top. A friend of mine, Mike Howard, who's a great artist, but he's from the same valley I'm from. He painted those cows. Velvet pillow there, and a cell phone photograph I took of the Chattahoochee River that I printed on chiffon, sort of hanging down there like a drape. Yeah.
Incredible. I think that that really helps us understand how you might bring all of these references together. I've got a couple more. Let's have a look at this one called Hot Water.
Yeah. Oh, and by the way, these are real big. So as your audience looks at these, like the one we just looked at with the tiger, that's probably 6 feet tall. This one here is 9 feet tall.
Oh, wow.
And this was one of the early river quilts. This is really when I was calling them river raft quilts. And you can see this sort of has a raft look to it. And the idea was that these were sort of these like conceptual vessels that like flotation devices that like a woman and her children and could get on the Chattahoochee River and like float down to the Gulf of Mexico, on this sort of escape adventure, sort of this like Alice in Wonderland, hook fence sort of adventure. And so I made a whole series of these river raft quilts. And this one, there's the strip quilt on the right that I stuffed in each row with polyfill and to make it look like it would float if you put it on the water. And then there's like a knitted escape tunnel in case on this adventure you had to escape. And on the top, there's this plastic pom-pom that could like, flutter in the wind and tell you one direction. And so these river raft quilts are sort of equipped with anything that like a mother and her children might need in some sort of quick escape down the river. And so that's sort of how it started. And, yeah.
There's another one here called Coverage Area, which is a little bit different. It's got more of the imagery or the sort of photographic or video stills within it.
Yeah.
Can you
so this is a river raft quilt about my, sort of based around my hometown. It's like and they started to sort of turn into overview maps. And so like this is like I was sort of looking down on the Chattahoochee River. And there's the quilt sashing there is like the street blocks, and there's the river on the left and the waterfall that goes over the dam that powered the turbines that ran the cotton mills. And and then on the top right is a photograph that a photographer friend of mine gave me. His name is Andres Gonzalez, and it's a person hiding under a textile. And so I sort of put that there for the mills, Yeah.
So it's like a map.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So these are like maps, like overhead maps. Some are like rafts. Some are sort of both. They sort of like, because I don't plan these pieces out. They evolve as I make the studio. So I don't think like, today I'm going to make a map. I think today I'm going to make probably one of those river raft quilts. We'll see what happens, and if at the end it's a map, then it's a map,
Yeah. A bit like, I guess, how your sort of approach to repurposing fabrics is you're referencing something, but you're leaving it very open and leaving it, open for interpretation, and it's sort of an idea rather than something super specific. So is that so you make in quite an improvisational way?
Yeah, it's improvised in that I don't have a plan about where I'm going to put each piece of fabric. when I walk into the studio. But, you know, it's not, and, you know, it's not improvised in that I just am willy-nilly about it.
Okay.
You know what I mean? I'm not like, I'll put some green there, you know, like these are like real deliberate, like purposeful decisions, and
Yeah.
sort of do it on the fly. I remember one time, this was actually fairly recently, I was at my own opening somewhere, and this man was looking at one of my pieces, and he was very complimentary. But one thing he said to me, he was like, you know, I think my favorite part about your work is some of these things that you didn't plan. I don't even think you meant to do it, you know. And he meant it as a compliment. I was like, I meant to do everything.
Yeah.
Like I meant to do every thread that's like laying in some weird direction that you think I didn't notice or didn't do on purpose. I did that on purpose, you know.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And that's, I guess, one of the things perhaps that I really admire about your work, Coulter, is it's clear that there's intention and mindfulness. You're repurposing, you're making all sorts of fabrics work in a piece, but in the end, it looks fun. It looks somewhat effortless. It looks joyful. And I think that's sort of what is so fantastic. So I'm going to be very complimentary too, because I think that that's one of the hardest things, right? Is making the work look effortless. That's what, and that applies to all sorts of art, like ballet. You know, it's all the work and muscle and practice and failure that then means it looks graceful and beautiful and fun. So I'd love to just ask you, you grew up in the South and you're living in rural Mississippi. And I think you might be one of those Americans who's very lucky and has a lineage of quilters in your family. Yeah. Is that right? I mean, in Australia, even though I'm a passionate quilter, that sort of lineage isn't there. We don't have the long tradition of families making quilts and, you know, being taught quilting. I learned everything I know on YouTube, essentially, aside from basic sewing skills. Is that where your sewing background comes from?
Yeah, that's definitely where my sewing background comes from. On a practical level, I didn't learn to sew. So my great grandmother and grandmother, you know, my mom, all seamstresses, all sewers. In fact, in one of those studio shots, you can see my great grandmother's quilt in the background. But you know, I grew up with three brothers. I did not have any interest in sewing. I grew up in the 80s and 90s, like in a city. Even though I was in the South, I was still in the city. I wanted to ride bikes. You know, I wanted to be an artist that painted with a paintbrush. And so, you know, I was like, Mom, I don't want to sew dresses, you know? And so it wasn't until, but she sewed my whole life, like quilts, clothes, you know, she could do anything, still very prolific quilter and an artist in her own right. So it wasn't until I was in college one time when I came home and I was like, you know, let me get into your scrap basket and we'll make a quilt. So I was like 19, 20, 21 when I finally started sewing with her. And, you know, and I was away, you know, I lived 2 states away. And so when I did have questions, I either called her or went to YouTube. So I learned a lot of stuff from YouTube as well.
Yeah.
I love
it. Good. Well, we do see, and I'll show a couple of quilts here now, we do see some traditional patchwork coming into your pieces, and I'd love to talk through that because I think there's something interesting about recognisable patchwork in contemporary art. So I'll show this piece. It's called Fabrica. Could you describe this piece for me, Coulter?
Yeah, so it's like a 1960s like blanket wool, and then it's got sort of like you know, the name of the pattern, like attic windows, grandmother's attic windows, something like that. and to give like sort of this 3D effect, and then each sort of compartment I've put like access to a world. Like there might be something beyond that, and some compartments are a little bit more closed off, some are open, some show something different. So I was just sort of thinking about sort of different dimensions or mysterious, sort of mystery and stuff. I'm not really an answer person, I'm sort of looking for the questions really.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's really interesting because it does sort of reference a quilt in this fact it's got those attic windows, but it's also a rectangle, and it has that kind of form. Let's have another look at a piece that certainly breaks away from what we might recognize as a quilt. This has got is it puff quilt? I don't know, what do you call the little toys?
It's really just it was made, this is a quilt top that came in an unfinished quilt top, and it's made out of like 1970s polyesters, so it was made out of suits, double knit, and one is turned, I've turned one inside out, and then the other is just right side forward or whatever. And this is one of my sort of war quilts. You can see at the top there's like the paratroopers coming down, and references to the infantry at Fort Benning. And I sort of envisioned this as like this mountain lion is sort of this maternal figure, and she's being like pursued, but she's in this like digitized forest, and but she's clever. In my mind, she gets away. So, these are sort of like just fantastical scenarios that, may or may not have some sort of, connection to somebody's real life.
Yeah. So another body of work you have is called War Quilts, and I'd love to hear a little bit about that. Obviously, we think immediately that they might be political quilts. Can you explain what that body of work's about, Coulter?
Yeah, well, I grew up in Columbus, Georgia, next to Fort Benning, and so the military was always there. It was like war and all that sort of stuff was never some foreign thing far away. Like there were literally soldiers walking around all over town, and I remember I was like, I don't know, 12 or 13. I guess it was like 1990. The uniforms really started to change in town to a sand color, that sand.
Oh, yeah.
Because the war was changing from the jungles to the sand and all that. And it was just very like visually striking to me that my town changed color, and then, there was like Operation Desert Storm, and we had like these really sort of bright green rockets flying across the sky with these night vision cameras. And it was just like this visually striking time period for me when I was seeing all this when I was like 12 or 13 years old in my hometown, and on TV and stuff. And I was telling someone the other day, it was sort of like my sort of visual world and my political, it all kind of crossed at that time and just sort of never uncrossed. But I don't, these are political quilts in that they're about war and love and conflict and human beings. But I'm completely uninterested in telling anybody what to think or how to vote.
Yeah, I guess there's a bunch of different politics we can talk about generally with art and quilting, and the idea of repurposing fabric. We talk about the politic of sustainability. There's also, I guess, some idea about, quilts as art that were traditionally, quilts being something domestic and something considered women's. There's a lot of layers of politics. And do any of those come into your practice and are things you think about when you're making work? All of these sort of layers that go beyond the basic craft of making, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, well, like, unrecognized women's labor is at the top.
Mm.
That is like really something I think about and make work for. Not, but that's going to be the default. Like that just sort of comes into play no matter what I do. Because that's just the fact of how it was. And one thing that accidentally comes into play is that my work is very sustainable environmentally. Just by accident. Like the reason I started using old fabric is because it was free and because it was abundant and available, and I didn't have to pay for it, and people were kind in bringing it to me, and I've told people this before, I love making work with old fabric so much that even if it was like a little bit bad for the environment, I would still do it this way. It's just fortunate for me that it's really much better for the environment. That was just a good happenstance.
What's the wildest piece of fabric you've ever brought into the studio?
Well, people bring me animal pelts. So
right.
Yeah, so I get like
literally wildest.
Beaver tails, raccoon faces, possum faces, like yeah, it's the animal stuff that's pretty funny. I use it.
You use it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I ask you what the wildest is and you say, I've got an animal.
I got bird feathers this morning. I left my house to go on my like daily walk, run or whatever, and a lady like 2 or 3 doors down came out of her front door and handed me a Ziploc bag of bluebird and hawk feathers to use in my work.
So interesting. Okay, we've got a slight change of pace. A couple of our team were really excited that I was interviewing you, Coulter, and they've submitted a question. So the first question I'd like to play is from our production lead, Anna. I'm just going to bring up a couple of images while I'm playing this question from Anna. And then, we can chat through your response.
Hi, Coulter. My name's Anna. I'm wondering what beauty means to you. Many of your pieces find beauty in imperfection and like the wear of the fabric. I'm wondering if you see beauty as one of your goals when you're creating a piece, or is it more just like a byproduct, like something more like truth that comes through the actual making process itself?
Yeah. So I definitely want to make something beautiful. And then there's sort of, in my mind, a little bit different than pretty, which I also and like my parents just the other day they were asking me, they're like, why are you, they're very supportive of my work and they're the reason I'm an artist. So this was not a critique. They were truly wondering, like, why do I use so many ruffles and bows and satin when I never was into that growing up? I certainly don't dress like that. I'm very much like a basic sweatshirt and leggings person, and it's because I think all of that stuff is very pretty, and I think it's very beautiful, and I'm attracted to it, for the texture and the colors and the shine and like the sculpture of the wave of the satin ruffle. And I also think that it has value because women have been doing it for all these years, and have sort of mastered these ways to make these like beautiful and pretty things. But I do think that like, ruffles, bows, shiny satin, like pillows, sometimes, smockings and stuff like that. When you can get the prettiness and the beauty, like the truthful beauty at the same time, like that's sort of what you're going for. And it's not easy to do because, if you have some sort of like, modern art type aesthetic, sometimes it works counter to the pretty things, and trying to mesh it all together.
It's interesting, the works that I pulled in as an example of this They're in your wall quilt series too. So you're finding, I think, beauty in some of these themes that are kind of in contrast to each other. So I'm just showing Jump School, which is a circular quilt, and it has some. Are these the little cutout dolls that you've got at the top?
Yeah. So this is a quilt that's built. It's 10 feet wide. It's very big, and
Wow.
it's built on an old caterer's tablecloth. I worked 20 years in the restaurant industry, and so I'm a waitress, or I was. I hadn't waitressed in 5 years, but and so I have a lot of references that come up to my years spent in the service industry. And so this is built on a big round tablecloth. And it's called Jump School, which is the first week of paratrooper training at Fort Benning in Columbus. You could go watch people jump from the airplanes and stuff. And so in this one, that's sort of like the idea is that you and your children have like jumped from this sort of airplane. You're sort of spinning around to the ground to this sort of vague target. And it's not meant to be scary, but it's sort of meant to be this sort of like, adventure. And it's just you and you're holding hands with your kids and like, who knows where you land, hopefully on that pink X, and then you have this chiffon area at the top that's sort of got something that's sort of like reminiscent of maybe a heartbeat or something,
Yeah. Let's look at Blue Butterfly.
Yeah, and this is about 5 feet square. I sort of picture this as like an overhead map. Again, like I like to use this, the sashing as like, sort of city blocks, map squares or whatever. And this is one of the war quilts that I was thinking sort of like a war map. So you have sort of real grungy areas and with like that old spray painted drop cloth on there, juxtaposed next to like a pretty embroidered butterfly and these like hot pinks and and the like floral curtains and stuff.
Beautiful. Let's look at one more. And this duvet cup, this chenille number in the top right corner I'm not sure, it's very familiar to me. I don't know if it's something I grew up with or maybe it's sleepovers or something like that. But this one's called Country Captain.
Yeah. So Country Captain is another war quilt. It's 5 feet-ish square. And then on the right, you have the chenille bedspread, which was me and one of my son's bedspread we slept under for like 5 or 6 years until it totally fell apart. And it was super gigantic. So 15 pieces. And then on the left, you've got, it's like interlocked with the Canta quilt. And then you've got the, sort of the attic windows variation again, sort of showing the compartmentalization. And this is really about the cross-cultural exchange in the war industry. There's this dish in Columbus, Georgia, growing up, we used to eat called Country Captain. And it's this rice and fried chicken. And it had like a curry sauce on it. And it was the single only curry dish I ever had growing up. Like it was the only one anybody ever made. And it came to us through Fort Benning, through the military. And and so that whole quilt is sort of about the cultural exchanges that happen by default through military actions.
Yeah. So interesting because there's a real juxtaposition of something domestic with that chenille bedspread, but also those ideas and combining. And are they little, what are the little packets on it? Are they cigarette packets?
Yeah, those are soft pack cigarette pockets that were in the front pocket of some work shirts that were donated to my studio.
Oh, wow.
I mean, those things were like the 50s.
Yeah, so I hadn't thought too much about that, but you've got things coming into the studio that might have things in their pockets and extra stories to tell.
Yeah, I get grocery lists. I get photographs. I get like cigarette packs like that. Yeah, I get all sorts of stuff in my studio it's sort of attached to the clothing.
Yeah.
As some money every now and then, but it's never much. So they check the pockets before they bring the clothes.
Yeah, I guess that's, you've got this fabric or the clothing or the bedding or whatever it might be that already tells its own story or has been wrapped around humans. And then there's an extra layer of what those humans possessed or what was important, or maybe what wasn't important to them.
Yeah.
If you discarded it and it was in the pocket, maybe.
And it really sort of speaks to the, intention of the people who give me stuff. Like, a lot of times people who donate this stuff are just honestly, well, a lot of times they're supportive of me, but they're honestly just overwhelmed with stuff. They inherit all these, like, they'll inherit either clothes or somebody's fabric collection of like great aunt such and such, and they feel too guilty to throw it away because she loved it so much, but they don't want it to go to landfill or anything. So, because they would feel like she probably haunt them. so they bring it to me because they know I'll use it and like, give it a little bit further life, and it absolves them of any sort of guilt of like throwing away.
Yeah.
Great Aunt Christmas.
Oh, yes.
1,000 boxes of knitting needles. So
yeah, the guilt transfer. It's I can't throw this away, so I'm going to give it to somebody who then feels like they can't throw it away. They're going to give it, and then they give it to you, and you turn it into an artwork, and you've lifted the guilt off everybody.
Yeah, everybody's, and then I get art supplies. I mean, it works for everybody. Yeah. So.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Let's move on to another series of work. And I have another question from our content manager, Nicola. And she wants to ask about your, I think it's part of your River Quilt series. I'll bring up a few images again and I'll play Nick's question.
Hi, Coulter. My question is around the video chiffons. It says that you crowdsourced Snapchat videos donated from teenagers, and I would just love to know what that experience was like. I mean, technically, how did you ask for them? Did you give them any prompts in particular? I love the works. They're so beautiful and so lovely to look at and intricate. And I also wanted to know how you chose them in the end. Was it from your own feeling of watching the videos, or more about the composition of the stills, or more guided by intuition?
Yeah, well, in terms of crowdsourcing videos from teenagers, it's a matter of me asking my 2 teenage sons for videos. I just say, as you could see in earlier works that we went through, I was using photographs, but I was using actual photographs, and eventually I wanted to sew through these photographs. So I was like, well, I'll start getting these, printed. But then this was at the same time my kids were turning into teenagers, and they just had this real abundance of photography and video on their phones, and it was documenting their sort of wild rural lives out here in North Mississippi. And I just thought that they had these real like beautiful moments of them out in, because, they're outside all the time on the land, like going to swimming holes, spinning their trucks on dusty fields. Like, these are kids that are outside and social and doing things, and so that's everybody, not just my kids. In fact, they do too much. They all need to calm down. But I thought, I was like, I asked the boys, I was like, hey, that's actually a really pretty video of the Yakima River or whatever. Can you send that to me? And, they'd send it to me, and I would screenshot it on my phone and get it printed on chiffon. And that's how it started. And they send me the videos. And, they have these funny rules, like stuff that might get them in trouble. They usually wait a month before they send it to me because they feel like it's been long enough. They won't get on restriction after a month. But in terms of what I choose and how I choose it, I go through the videos very, very slowly on my phone, like super slow, and sort of wait, for the prettiest moment or the most mysterious moment or the moment where something is happening where there's not an answer, but there might be an interesting question. And then that's what I screenshot.
Wow.
So.
And here's an image of more from that series. I thought it would be good to see them in abundance and kind of next to each other so that we can see how the works sort of relate to each other and what you're developing as an idea in the series.
Yeah, and like one image that I just used over and over and over again was of my oldest son. He was skinny dipping in a swimming hole, like way out in the county somewhere. I don't even know if adults know where this place is, but it was at nighttime, and he runs out of the, it's just this dark swimming hole, and it's illuminated by pickup truck headlights. And so it's lit very dramatically. And then out from this cliff runs my son, who's naked. and he like takes this beautiful jump, into the swimming hole and makes this like great white splash, in the middle of the darkness. And so I used that particular image over and over again. So there's some images that I keep going back to, that they go out, they take their pickup trucks and they spin in the dusty fields out by the river bottoms. And it creates these like huge dust clouds that go up in the air, and it's real pretty. So I use those images as well.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really interested in, there's a few things about these pieces that got me thinking, Coulter. Like when I first saw them, and because of the repetition, and let's have a look at one as an example. Because of the repetition of the image, I was immediately taken to pop art, that idea, or sort of Andy Warhol putting the same image next to each other. And I guess the difference is, with an Andy Warhol, it's an image of something very recognizable, or someone very recognizable, Elvis Presley or Marilyn. And you find yourself looking at the repetition and sort of trying to compare it, or trying to sort of think, okay, what's the difference between these repeated images? And is this image repeated because it's so important to you? So that was one. And if you just sort of follow my little kind of strange thread of thought here, and we can chat about it. The other thing is it's patchwork of images, which is really interesting. So if you've been interested in patchwork quilts, what you're doing here is you're finding another way to piece together images.
That's it. Thank you for recognizing that. Yeah, it wasn't until I've made these and started to show them that people every now and then would mention like Andy Warhol, and I was like, oh yeah, I guess so. But all for me, the quilting part, I was like, it's the natural, like it's the repetitive pattern. Like, if I were to make a quilt with a fabric that had flowers on it, I would put 5 squares this way, 5 squares down, and 5, so. Yeah. My initial intention was to make it look like a quilt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's also, and I think the other thought I had that I connected to is that it talks about the abundance of imagery. We all have camera rolls now that are almost the exact same image. We'll take 10 shots when we just want one good one. And so we've got 10 images that are almost exact that all sit next to each other. That's the other thing it kind of reminded me of, is our camera rolls, which become like film reels, even if they're still images, and some connection there.
Yeah, I see a strong parallel between the, and not just a real strong parallel, it actually feels the exact same to me. The abundance of thrown away clothes I have in my studio, and the abundance of soon to be deleted, thrown away photographs that are floating out there, in space or the internet, whatever you call it. And I think, and they all, even when they're not good, even when they're bad photos, even when the clothes are torn or old or whatever, they're all documenting our lives, you know.
Mm.
And so it doesn't really take much. You can make we document ourselves even in the leftovers, even in the trash, you know. In fact, it might be more of a document sometimes, you know. And so yeah, using old photographs and using old clothes feels exactly the same to me.
Yeah. A difference of who we actually are and who we want to be through the clothes we keep and the clothes we discard, and the images we keep and the images we discard. And also value, because now there's an abundance of clothes and you can buy clothes very cheaply. And whereas however long ago you had to really think about what you would buy and you had to really sort of spend money on clothes. And same with photos. Now we take 1,000 photos to get 10 good ones, whereas we used to have to really think about the frame and the fact that maybe a roll of film to get developed in the 80s or 90s, I can't remember, $30. I'm just getting, but it's a different thing now about the value.
Yeah.
And also, I have kids and I think about all those photos that are sitting in my camera roll or my cloud with little snapshots of beauty, and it's only if I was to spend hours would I sit and go through them all. Yeah. So interesting, all these ideas that come into play in these works. And I'd love to show a couple more, which I think you're sort of extending the work with the plaited fabric. You would probably do a much better job of describing this than me, but we're starting to see soft sculpture happening here, and I'd love to hear about these works, which are part of, I think, a similar body of work. This one's called Trials of the Earth.
Yeah. So yeah, these are all on panel. These just, you know, at some point in the course of all this, my works just became like sewn upholsteries. So I'm still hand sewing and stuff, but everything's on panel because it's way easier to hang. And the stuff with muslin backs and like, but you know, the panel on the back is the back layer of what would be a quilt. They're covered in quilt batting. The middle layer is quilt batting and upholstery foam, and everything's sewn still. I can just hang it. So because of that, I'm able to do sort of a lot more structural stuff. And I can hang these braids around the outside of this work. I can loop a braid over the back, you know, and I don't have to worry about weight problems when I hang it. And these works look flat, like sort of the back panel area looks flat, but they're rounded in real life. They're rounded like a seat cushion. So just sort of envision that as you look at them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so, you know, the top layers are done with, you know, chiffon. So underneath is very bright colored fabrics. So I've got, you know, underneath would be like a very hot pink, you know, lots of really like neon greens. And then when I put the sort of real dull printed chiffon over the top, it gives it sort of this glow effect.
Yeah, beautiful. Are these recent works, these ones?
Yeah. I made that one right there this summer. Yeah, all this has been made in this year. Yeah. So.
And what are you working towards at the moment?
Well, I have a solo show at the Mississippi Museum of Art in March. And I currently have a solo show up at the Bo Bartlett Center in Columbus, Georgia. It's all those all my river quilts, and the Bo Bartlett Center is right there on the Chattahoochee River.
Oh, fantastic!
Quilts are about so in this big, beautiful room with these windows, so you can like see the quilts and then look over the river. It's nice.
Oh wow, that's amazing! I wish I could see it. I just enjoy your work from afar on a screen, Coulter. But one day.
Yeah.
I want to know about what you think about, you know, your work and what you're leaving, I guess, as a legacy. So there's so much about repurposing and I guess intentionally or perhaps unintentionally adding value to things that are discarded by creating artwork from them. And I'm wondering what you would like people to walk away with, or when you think, people looking back on your different bodies of work, what would you like to be left behind, or what would you like the feeling to be about your work?
Well, sort of what I'm trying to do in my work is not make connections, because I know that the connections are there. I don't have to make any connections. I just am discovering the connections between all of us. And so, and so when I make my work, I'm trying to discover this connection that I know we all have, and so I do hope that, when people look at my work, they connect to it in some way. It doesn't matter which way to me. And that, if, and when people come into my studio and they see sort of the abundance of stuff that people leave, I hope that they never buy a cheap fast fashion piece of clothing ever again. Like if you come into my studio, you'll be like, this is just absolutely too much textiles and clothes.
Yeah.
Like, we need to never go shopping again. So, that's not the overall point of my work. That's just sort of like, a happenstance. But no, like, in terms of like what I want from my artwork is, I want me to be able to make it and then people to be able to connect to it,
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you. We have a little bit of a segment that we do in our Friday Feature Artist interviews called Every Artist Must. And the way that it works is I start the sentence and then you spontaneously finish the sentence. Are you game for Every Artist Must? Okay, let's give it a go. Every artist must own.
Oh, must own. Oh, I'm not going to be good at this game. I mean, I make my work from actual trash, so I'm not sure you own anything. I don't know, a place to make it. I don't want to say it's, I don't know. I can't.
Place to make it. Okay. Actually, this is the beauty of this section is there's no bad answer because that was a fantastic answer. Okay. Every artist must create.
Yeah, I think every artist must create something that is true to themselves. I think you need to make work about what you know and not make work about what you think people want you to know.
I love that. Every artist must avoid
what I just said before.
I know, just as I was saying that, I thought to myself, you actually just answered that one.
Yeah, just be your true self, because be your true self, because everything that you are is good enough to make artwork.
Yeah. Every artist must learn.
I guess, like, on a practical, I'm not finishing these sentences right, but yeah, every artist must learn how to actually do their craft. Like, every artist must practice. I think you've got to do it a lot over and over and over again. And then it frees you up to then later be yourself, Yeah. So.
Yep. That effortless thing that we were talking about earlier. Yeah. Every artist must remember.
I don't know. Oh, well, every artist, I'm so bad at being bossy that saying somebody must do something is what throws me off.
Every artist could remember.
Yeah. Every artist could remember, the artists that came before them or that work simultaneously as they're working, exposure to other arts is, I think, pretty essential.
Yeah. And one more, I promise, just one more. Every quilter could.
Oh God, every quilter could, if the world would just let her, like every quilter deserves it all, and I just want the world to recognize that. For the quilting is the greatest art form to me, and I owe all of it to quilting. And I think it's like the biggest, boldest thing in the house is the quilt laying on the bed, and I wish that that was recognized. So
Me
really
too.
answer your question in like a fast way, but
No. Oh, look, you've given me goosebumps because, as I like to say repeatedly, I am a keen quilter. So preaching to the converted over here. And Coulter, this interview has been so lovely, and you've been so generous with your ideas and talking about your work. We've come to the end. Thank you so much for your time.
yeah.
We will link to Coulter's Instagram and website in our show notes. So do take a moment to have a look at Coulter's work. And again, if you are listening in today, take a look at the episode description for the link where you'll find all the images of the artwork that we showed. But that's it. Thank you so much, Coulter. Have a wonderful evening. And
thank you. It was really fun. I really enjoyed having this conversation. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, bye for now.
Bye.